If what Will said and that bumper video music doesn't get you ready, I've got nothing to offer you at this moment. Hey, what I need you to know on the heels of what Will just said is that you're not here by accident. I was reminded of that this morning. My heart is full. You need to know that I love being a part of this church, yes, leading this church, but I love being a part of this church more than I ever have. When our family showed up here on May the 29th, 2010, not knowing exactly what would be on the other side, I just want you to know that my heart is full, but you're not here by accident. I was reminded of that this morning as I went into one of the kids' classes where my 16-year-old is serving right now. He's serving with my friend Marcelo from the Dominican Republic and my new friend Gwen, who grew up her whole life in Singapore until moving to San Francisco this year. I want you to know this morning you're not here by accident. You've been led in worship by Aline, who grew up in Romania. You've been led in worship by David, who grew up on the Amazon in Brazil. You've been led in worship by Danny Kwan, who, yes, he's Korean, but grew up in Argentina. I don't understand it all. I'm just here to tell you, you're not here by mistake. Who knew that we would end up here? And so with that same idea that I tell you, we're celebrating a milestone on our staff team this month as Will and B. Maraza have been on staff now. Will's our teaching pastor. He's been our administrative assistant. He's been our family pastor. He's now our executive pastor. B was leading us in worship alongside Seth today. 10 years on the team. These two know it from me privately, but you guys know that I love you. Can't imagine the last decade in mine and Shauna's life. I can't imagine the last decade in our church. It's been great to see Honor and Noble come into, Honor was already there as a baby at our first launch meeting. And I'm just grateful. My life is richer. Our church is stronger. My faith is greater because you guys are in our midst. So thank you. Yeah. And it is December. It's hard to imagine. Anybody feel like we say this every year? I don't know. This year especially, it feels like it's just going so fast. So it is December, and one of the things I'm looking forward to this December that we did not enjoy last December is we will gather in this place on Christmas Eve. Everybody, all of you people being loud, I'm assuming you're going to be here. But what I know is you've already got a flight out on the 13th and the 17th and the 21st and the 23rd. But for those of us who are going to be here, 5 p.m. Christmas Eve, we will gather, and for those of you, the few of you, or the many of you who've already left by then, we will be broadcasting online, just like we do with everything we do here at Epic. But December also means that we are in the deep of the Hope Project. It is our annual initiative that funds our partners in the city across the globe, and you're going to meet some of our global partners today. Excited about that. Our goal this year is $300,000, and I've asked our staff team and our leader to try to bring our best gift by today, so you can join us on that journey. If today doesn't work out, all throughout December and even into January if need be, we are going to fund our partners. I believe that by faith, and I appreciate your generosity as we lean in together and do collectively what we could never do alone. So excited about that. But for today, about 4 years ago, Shauna and I were at a conference in London, and I heard a speaker say something. He wasn't even the main speaker. He was like the MC of the moment, like a little 3-minute moment. But he said something that got my attention, and here's what he said. The voice that you listen to will become the voice that you speak with. The voice that I listen to eventually becomes the voice that I speak with. And I think that's so true, but I believe it goes further. I also believe this, and here's why I want to launch into our topic for today. The voices that you listen to most will create the future that you live in most. The voices you listen to most will create the future that you live in most. And I just need you to know from all of our leaders here at Epic, we care deeply about your future. It's why we started this church, because we care about your future. It is why we work hard every week, week in and week out. It is why we get up at 5 and pray. It is why we have meetings. It is why we try to clarify, God, what are you saying to us? Because we deeply care about your future. But we know this. We're just one voice of many in your lives, and we know that the voices that you and I listen to most will create the future we live in most. Let's think about our biggest regrets in life. Is it not because we listened to the wrong voice? And here's the big question I'm after today. Who are you taking your faith cues from? Who are you taking your faith cues from? Like, who are you giving access to your heart, your mind, your life? Your presence of faith or your absence of faith right now, you don't know this maybe, but it is in large part determined by the voices that you're listening to. And I want to be a voice for you today. I say that with all humility, but I say it with great confidence and faith. I want to be a voice you can trust. I want to, and I have not always been able to say this, but I want to say what Paul said, like, follow me in my faith journey as I follow Christ. And there's so many voices in our midst here today, even in this room, who've been a voice of faith and hope and helping me distinguish who I need to trust in my own life. So for those of you who play that role in my life, thank you. But I want to play that collectively in your lives, whether you're in the room or watching at home today. And here's why this is such a big deal, who we listen to, where we take our faith cues from. There are some things in your future that Jesus is only going to do if you believe him for them. There are some things in your future that Jesus is only going to do if you believe him for them. I spent this week working on my January 9th message. I don't tell you that because I'm way ahead. I tell you that because I've got a couple guest speakers the next 2 weeks. When I say guest speakers, I mean people that are in this house that you're going to love hearing from. I don't know why my wife's so excited about me not preaching. I assume it has nothing to do with what she'll hear on Sunday, but the fact that she'll have my undivided attention those 2 weeks. I'm excited too. That's so good. But January 9th, we're going to look at Mark chapter 6, where Jesus is in his hometown, and it literally says this because of the way he set it up, not because he's limited, but he limits himself at times to responding to the level of faith that's present. It literally is going to say in his hometown, he could not do many miracles there because of the lack of faith, and he was amazed. We'll also learn that day that there are only 2 times the scriptures ever teach us that Jesus was amazed. Once because of how much faith the centurion had, once because there was no faith in his hometown. The only thing that seems to amaze Jesus is whether our faith is present or it's absent. But as you think about who you take your cues from, I want you to really believe this. There are some things that you will miss out on unless you trust Jesus for them. There's a reason he says, ask, seek, and knock. And I think about the Israelites, whom the writer of Hebrews tells us, these are the ones, remember, that Moses went to free them from their slavery in Egypt, bring them to the promised land. But we read these crucial words in Hebrews 3:19. So we see that they were unable to enter because of they weren't able to enter. Were they not able to enter because God didn't have a purpose? Were they unable to enter because they were too old or too young? Were they unable to enter because the destination, they couldn't see how great it would be? Were they unable to enter because they weren't smart enough? No, they were simply unable to enter the destiny and the destination God had for them because of their unbelief. So you know it's got to make this pastor wonder, what have you not been able to enter because of your unbelief? It's got to make this man wonder, what have I not been able to enter because of my unbelief? What has my family missed out on because of my unbelief? But let's turn the negative into a positive. If it's true on the negative, it must be true on the positive. What's ahead for us if we choose to believe? What's ahead for your life? What's ahead for your marriage that you think is on the brink of being over? But what is ahead if you and your spouse choose to believe? What is ahead in your vocation if you choose to believe that even though it's less money to begin with, God's still going to use you and he's still going to provide for your needs? What is ahead for us collectively as a church if we will actually trust Jesus? I just need you to know that I'm going to be in the group of belief. I'm thankful for the army around that has that same kind of faith, and I want to invite you to that side because we are going to see Jesus do some things. Now, today, what I want you to do is know that the Israelites missed out because they took their cues from the wrong sources. I know there are a ton of sources in your life because there are a ton of sources in my life. We cannot not hear everything that's being said, but it is time to stop paying attention to some things that are being said and start paying attention to what's already been said and what the Spirit's speaking in our life today. So we're in Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 21. You can stand with me. I'll tell you a little bit about our text as we get into it, but this is the frame for us. I just want you to keep asking yourself, who am I really taking my cues from? Because here's what can happen today. We can be inspired today. You can even think, I took my cues from our pastor today or even from what God said to me. But guys, I know how this ends. We're going to go and do other things. We're going to watch other programs. We're going to read news sources. We're going to be on social media. We're going to hear politicians this week. We're going to hear conspiracy theorists this week. We're going to hear our boss who's super smart, so we think everything he or she is saying must be true. And some of it may be true, but a lot of it, especially when it comes to this, probably won't be true. And so I really want you to be thinking, who am I really taking my cues from? So we're going to be in Mark 5, 21 through 24. Then we'll pause and we'll pick it up in 35 through 43. I'll tell you why whenever we get through 24. Verse 21 of Mark 5, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. Pause for a moment because we're going to pick up in 35. What happens next is while Jesus and Jairus are there, a woman who's had this massive health issue for 12 years comes up. It's a powerful moment, and it's one that our own Minnie Lee is going to teach us about next Sunday. We cannot wait. It's going to be incredible. She's going to share from the scriptures, share from her own story that resonates some with that woman's story. But we pick up Jairus and Jesus in verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking to this woman, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid, just believe. For somebody today, those 5 words are all yours today. That's all you need. That's your secret. That's what's on the other side. Don't be afraid, just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. The child was dead, just so you know. Like, oh, so it wasn't a big miracle. No, she was actually dead. More on that in a moment. But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. Incidentally, not maybe ironic, but yes, very ironic. The woman who had an issue of blood had an issue of blood for 12 years. At this, they were completely astonished. And there he goes again. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. Have a seat. I think there's a lot here, and wherever you're at in your faith, I think there's something for you today. For some of you today, what needs to happen, what's going to happen, I pray and believe, is you're going to start that initial faith with Jesus. You're going to realize you've been taking your faith cues from the wrong sources. Maybe it was a professor in college who told you that none of this Jesus stuff is true. It can't be, and they convinced you because they sounded really smart and had multiple degrees. Some of you, you've been taking your faith cues from your family. I'm grateful for your family, but they may not be the best faith cue people to take your faith cues from. Some of you have been taking it from friends. I hope that they are a good friend to you, but you might be taking your faith cues from the wrong people. Some of you need this initial faith. And we see Jairus come to Jesus with an initial faith. Some of you, for whom you'll put your trust in Jesus today, you can let us know this on the card, and we'll be able to come to you and say, hey, here's what it looks like to start that faith journey. But let's be honest, a lot of us have started our faith journey, and here's the question we're asking. Because of what life has thrown at us, here's our question. How do we keep our faith in Jesus? Like that 8-year-old faith isn't doing it for me anymore. Somebody told me, Ben, in a position like yours, that once I trusted Jesus, everything would be easier. Some people told me I didn't even need to take care of my body anymore because I just needed to have enough faith. And we need to know, how do we keep our faith in Jesus when circumstances get worse, not better? When we're running out of time and there's no help in sight? When we still lack what we know we have to keep on living, how do we keep our faith in Jesus? And what I want to do today is to tell you, the best way to keep your faith in Jesus isn't to pay attention mostly to your circumstances or to the voices of those who don't have faith in Jesus, but to pay attention to Jesus and those who take him at his word. So what I want to do is I want to show you initially, Jairus comes to Jesus and he tells him the situation. He's like, I need you to come heal my daughter. And I love this. It says Jesus goes with Jairus. Rachel and Justin did a beautiful job with their children, Maya and Caleb, leading us in the Advent moment today. You need to know that Advent means arrival or coming. We have a God who loves to come to us. And he doesn't just come to us on Sunday mornings, though I believe he's here. He comes to us in our struggles. He comes to us in our loneliness. He comes to us in the holidays. He comes to us in our job transitions. He comes to us when we're doubting. He comes to us when we're alone. He comes in many forms and in many fashions, but we have a God who comes to us. And I want to show you for Jairus, here's the whole framework for today. I want to show you the voices he could have listened to and what happened because he refused to listen to those voices, but to trust the voice that told him, I got you. Pay attention here. Don't look over there. Keep looking right here. So the first set of voices, you won't see it clearly in the text, but let me unpack it for you. It's the voice of the religious leaders. It's the voice of the religious leaders. When we read about Jairus, this is in the text. The rest of it, I want to tell you the kind of historical context. What we read about Jairus is that he's a synagogue leader. So it's not hard for you and I to imagine. He's a religious leader. He has authority. He's running a local synagogue, and there would be other religious leaders there. But what kinds of people, you answer out loud for me if you know it, what kinds of people did Jesus have his greatest conflict with? Religious leaders. He's a synagogue leader. What is the setting where Jesus has a lot of his conflicts? So we know that Jairus is going opposite of the voices of most of the religious leaders. Now, he wasn't the only one. I'll tell you about another one, at least in a moment. But we know that Jairus, as a synagogue leader, for him to approach Jesus is big time interesting because he's doing it when there's a crowd around. He's doing it publicly, and he's not chastising Jesus. He's not challenging Jesus. He is at the feet of Jesus. So for a synagogue leader whose religious leader friends would have thought, this guy is blaspheming, he's not true. Remember, who's going to get Jesus crucified? It's the religious leaders. So when he goes there in broad daylight, a crowd is surrounding him. I mean, he's going, I don't care what they think. I don't care what they say. I don't care about losing my position. He is my only hope, and here's why I'm here. Contrast that to Nicodemus, and Nicodemus is a super interesting character out of John 3. He's a teacher of the law. He's a Pharisee, and he's very curious about Jesus. And in John 3, Nicodemus doesn't come in the daytime. He doesn't come while there's a crowd present. He comes to Jesus he comes to him at night. I'm not outing Nicodemus. I'm just saying, look at what Jairus must have had to do to come to Jesus. And he had to decide, am I going to trust the guys, like I might lose my role, I might lose my standing, they're going to think I'm crazy, but I've seen enough to believe. So he comes with that initial faith, and it's a powerful moment, just for him to come initially. But after he's come to him initially, and the situation that Minnie's going to teach us on next week, now all of these people come from Jairus' home, and here's what they say. They give him the terrible news. And by the way, religious leaders, I'm not going to give them a pass, but this group that comes from Jairus' home, I think they're well-meaning individuals. There are a lot of well-meaning people in your life, but you still don't need to take your faith cues from them, especially when God has given a different word. So they come and they tell him the terrible news. Your daughter is dead. But then they ask this question. Why bother the teacher anymore? And then you see this, and feel free if you have a Bible with the notes on it. This is super interesting. It says, overhearing them. Overhearing them. Now, interestingly enough, this word in the Greek that gets translated as overhearing, it can also be translated as ignoring. Whichever it is, it's pretty fascinating. So they're saying to Jairus, she's dead. Don't bother Jesus anymore. So let's do the overhearing one. Jesus overhears that. He's like, they don't know what they're talking about. Listen to me. Or Jesus is like, I hear them, but I'm going to pretend like I don't hear them. And he says this, don't be afraid, Jairus. Just believe. His daughter's dead. What do you mean? Don't be afraid, just believe. Last week I said that we cannot just, when we're struggling with fear, just wish fear away. We actually have to replace our fear with faith. It's not just going to run away. We've got to replace it with faith. And that is exactly what Jesus says. He says, don't be afraid, just believe. Because if he had just said, don't be afraid, Jairus would have been like, I'm trying. You've got to replace your fear. You've got to replace it. It's not going away. You're not going to get the stock market tomorrow and go, now my fears are gone. You're not going to get like, oh, my Christmas shopping's done, or oh, I don't have to be with my in-laws for too many days this year. My fears are gone, right? No. You've got to replace it. And when Jesus says, don't be afraid, just believe, I love this in my study. Just believe. Here's what it means. Go on believing. Why was it important for Jesus to tell Jairus to go on believing? Jairus, here's why. But he had initial faith. Now he's got voices telling him to drop his faith. And Jesus says, don't drop that faith. Don't you pay attention to them. I know that is terrible news, but I want you to keep your faith. Keep on believing. I know it seems impossible. Keep believing. I know what the circumstances appear to be. Keep believing. I know you haven't been healed in a decade. Keep believing. I know that you're trying to get this situation figured out with your kids or your parents. Keep believing. I know you want to have children. You haven't yet. I don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but keep believing that God is good and that he holds to his word. Keep believing. So then they finally get back to the house. So those are the first two groups. Then they get back to the house, and as I understand it, they would have likely hired, back in the day for the Jews, they would have hired professional mourners. Can you imagine that job? I don't know these people. Got to make myself cry. And so they're mourning there around the house. And Jesus says, why all of this commotion and wailing? Then he says, she's not dead, she's only asleep. Don't miss this phrase, but they laughed at him. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. That seemed pretty foolish what Jesus said. Jesus hasn't been at the home, they've been at the home. They've been around death, they knows what death looks like. They're right, she's dead. But they laughed at him, and what I want to call this from that group, it's the laugh of unbelief. It's the laugh of the people in your life who, when they hear that you come to church, I remember meeting with an executive just in the last month or so, and they were at an offsite just for their executives in the company. It'd be a super familiar company to you guys. And they said they were trying to get vulnerability going with the group, and they said, hey, tell us something that no one knows about you here. And one guy, not my guy, but the other guy said to that group of executives, what you guys don't know about me is that I'm a Christian and I go to church every Sunday. Because he anticipated the laugh of unbelief. And he's not wrong. I mean, you guys at least get to say you go to church, but you work at Google. I'm like, I go to church and I work at one. What does that look like? What is that? And so there's this laugh of unbelief. And now I want you to see what happens next. This is my favorite moment. This is the thing that's like game changer for me personally, and I hope it will be for our church. The next thing Jesus does is he builds an environment of faith. Here's what he does. Look at it. I think it's in verse 40. It is in verse 40. He puts everybody out. What do you mean everybody? He puts every unbeliever out. Now, this is not like an evangelism thing, so this is not that. We know that Jesus, he leaves the 99 to go get the person who doesn't know him, okay? That's not that. But he's trying to create an environment of faith. Somehow, as I said earlier, he's restricted himself to doing some things only when there's faith present. And so what he does, he puts all the mourners outside. He puts everyone outside the house. And the only people that get to go in her room is Jairus, Jairus' wife, so the girl's mom. Jesus goes, and he takes Peter, James, and John. So as I understand it, the girl is there, she's dead, and it's Peter, James, John, Jesus, Jairus, and Jairus' wife. And what he's trying to do there is what we are aiming for, just so you know, as your pastors here at Epic. We are trying to build a bigger faith environment here. We are trying to make sure that when you walk in here, your belief goes up. Not because we're selling you something and we're hyping it up. It's because we are believing for you what you might not believe for yourself yet. But one day there's going to be new people coming here, and the faith that you're borrowing from us today, one day you will let them borrow yours. So we're trying to build a faith environment. And guys, we're not just doing that in our Sunday gatherings. That is what Aniki is leading out in with our kids. That is what Anthony is doing with our students. When you lead your small group, create an environment of faith. When you have dinner with friends, when we have staff meetings, create an environment of faith. Parents, create an environment of faith. If your kids are taking their faith cues from you, and they are, by the way, are they believing you more or what you're telling them about the news more, about the way the world works? Which are you giving them? Guys, when you have coffee one-on-one, have fun. Talk about football. Talk about the office. Talk about all the things, but get around to some place where you're going, especially if you're both believers. Hey, what can I help believe with you for? Sean and I had new friends over to the house Thursday night, and it was a rich time. They were there for 3.5 hours, and it was great. And towards the end of the night, after just hearing what's going on in their lives, I just said, hey, how can we pray for you? This isn't something I always, that's a pastor thing. I don't always do that. But I was like, we believe. We are believing. We've created a faith environment in our home. We're here trying to raise our kids in that. And they shared with us, and so we just went after God's heart, believing that God would do these things. That we would help him figure out the work-life balance, that he would help her find the job that she's meant to have, that God would bring faith to the guy's family because they're not people of faith. We were just going after it. And I wonder what it would look like for us to enter into and help be builders of faith environments where we believe that when God shows up, all things are possible. And God loves to show up. He loves to come. I love what Maya read earlier of Rachel and Justin. It's one of the things that was coming to my mind as I was thinking about Advent and thinking about this message about how Jesus loves to come. It says he came to his own. You may have to help me out. He came to his own, and they did not receive him. They rejected him. But to those who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become the children of God. So much about your future, our church's future, your family's future, your vocation future is going to come down to whether or not you can believe that Jesus is who he said he is and will do what he's promised to do. So much is riding on just that. So buy whoever's words you need to, but I'm telling you, some of them are going to lead you away from faith in Jesus. We want to create faith environments. Let me ask you this question. Which voices are influencing your current level of faith in Jesus? This is a really good question for you to answer. You don't have to answer it today, but I would work through it this week. Which voices am I honestly? And then what I want to do, guys, God has called me to minister to a lot of people, but he has not called me to hear from a lot of people about what I should believe about him. So I want to think, Ben, where are your boundary lines? And you're like, Ben, you get paid. I get paid to minister to all people. That is true. I do not get paid, nor would it ever be a good idea, I hope you would think, for me to take everyone's advice about who God is and how he works or doesn't work. So I want to create boundaries. And when someone shows me that they're actually not leaning into God anymore, they're no longer in the circle. I'm no longer taking cues there. They're no longer at the wisdom table. I need people in my life. Guys, I got enough things telling my physical eyes don't believe it. I've lived this way for the last 10 years. Ben, people go plant churches in San Francisco. It's a graveyard for church planting. You can't plant a church in downtown San Francisco. I can't, but God through me can. Ben, you're doing this pilot adoption thing in India. Like, it's probably not going to work. Oh, it wasn't easy, but God can. And people joined us. Hey, let's create an environment of faith. We'll do it in the backyard. We'll pray this girl home, and they did, and she is. What are we going to do, church? And right now, you know this. Like, oh, Ben, you've had so many. Listen, I'm on the front end of going, we're really going after real estate long-term as a 10-year-old church in this crazy city? Yes, we are. Yes, we are. We're going to believe it. We're going to stay in the fight until it comes. The things that we're going after, you're going to hear from our partners at the Pearl House today. Super excited about that, just for what they've seen God do through their own faith and the faith of others, including those of us here at Epic Church. And then think about this question. If people are taking their faith cues from you, what kind of faith do they likely have right now? Yes, I feel the conviction too. You're not alone. If your coworkers are taking their faith cues from you, if your wife, if your husband, if your friends, if your parents, if your kids, and by the way, to some degree, they are. They are. I told you about this laugh of unbelief. It reminds me of the laugh of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Anybody know about her laugh of unbelief? Oh my gosh, God's like, you're going to have a child in your old age, and she just starts cracking up. I know. Shauna and I would not be cracking up. We would be doing something else. We've loved having 4 kids. We look forward to being grandparents a long time from now. So there's 2 kinds of laugh from Sarah. The first is a laugh of disbelief. That's the laugh that was present in the home. But the next one is a second kind of laugh. It's what I'll just call the last laugh. Listen from Genesis 21, 6 and 7. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. It's the last laugh, isn't it? But don't miss this. Sarah says, holding baby Isaac, who would have said to me that I would be a mom? Who would have even imagined that I would be a mom? Who would have dared to tell me that I will be a mom? And I'm like, Sarah, someone did. Someone did. What do you mean he did? You just took your cues from someone else. There was an inner voice. There were a group of friends that were like, no, you can't do that. You're crazy. And you're like, you're right. That is crazy. Who would have told me I would have a baby? Someone did. Someone did. I don't know what you're believing God for. And I know it can be tempting because I live in the temptation to go, oh, I've seen him do this. Anybody play that game? We started a church of our Kavita home from India, but real estate, but this other issue, but anxiety in this person. I just can't imagine that would ever happen. Or there's people that come into our lives, and Sean and I are like, could they even come to faith in Jesus? It's a distance, folks. It is a distance. And I think about the laugh of unbelief versus the second laugh, the last laugh. I can't help but end this message by looking at the cross. It's one big, fat laugh of unbelief. He's on the cross. They strip him to ridicule him. They mock him. They laugh at him. They put a crown of thorns on his head to make fun of him for claiming to be a king. They put a sign over, King of the Jews, not to honor him, but to make fun of him because that's what he said he was. And then they just, if you're really the Son of God, why don't you save yourself? And everyone around is laughing. See, he didn't tell you the truth. He's not who he claimed to be. Look at him. He's helpless. He's nothing. He's just like the others that rose up and said they were going to do something different. But no, we are ending that movement so no one else will fall susceptible to the movement. It was dark on Friday. It was dark on Saturday. But then Jesus arose. And he said, I told you I was telling the truth. I kept my promise, and I'm getting the last laugh. You can trust him. And if you're a Christian, let me just be straight with you. You would be foolish to bet your eternity on him and not trust him for the thing at work. That's foolishness. You would be foolish to trust him that he's going to take care of you for the next 10,000 years and not trust him with your kids that he can bring them back. You would just be foolish to believe that he can resurrect from the dead even though they were laughing at him, and to think he can't actually carry you through this thing that he's telling you to start. So you tell me, who are you going to listen to? Who gets to speak the great truths over your life? Who are you letting create the future that you will live in? I'm going to ask you just to close your eyes, bow your head as our team comes up. I really do want to give us what we've been going after for a while as a church, but really to hit it again and just say, we want to create an environment of faith. That's what we're doing here at Epic. That's what we're going to do in what we call a response moment. These guys are going to lead us in a song that just goes exactly with what we've been talking about today. And I just want to keep asking you, are you really going to keep trusting the news? Are you really going to keep looking to politicians? Are you really going to trust conspiracy theorists? Are you really going to look to these celebrity Christians who care way more about their brand than they care about Jesus? Is that who's going to lead us? Is that what we're going after? Guys, he is faithful. He is telling us the truth. But he's usually not going to demand his way. He's not usually going to demand that we listen to him. He's going to give us an option. And I love Jairus. Yes, he got his girl back. Oh my gosh, that was a party. Get her something to eat. Yeah, whatever you want. Oh, but he was tempted. What kind of faith did it take him to break away from the religious leaders knowing they would oppose his move? What kind of faith did it take to keep believing Jesus when Jesus said, don't be afraid, just believe, when he was told his daughter was dead? And as they're laughing at Jesus as they enter the house, I'm sure he was tempted to laugh too. How foolish must it have looked to believe that this man was going to bring your 12-year-old girl back to life? But he went with him. And what we want to say today is if you don't have faith, this is your day. And if you've lost your faith, this is your day. And if you need to borrow faith, this is your day. There's a great big space in front of this stage. There's nothing magical about it, but we're just going to open this space up as an altar. And we're going to believe that the things that seem impossible, we want to hear a word from Jesus. Don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. Jesus, I know that there have been places we've been unable to enter due to our unbelief. And yes, we have regrets perhaps. We ask forgiveness for those things. But more than that, what I'm asking for is that today, moving forward, that we would move forward with faith. We would be a group of people who begin to believe you. And so this altar is open. Lord, would you come and have your way? I pray for grown men to get rid of their pride and come and just say to you, I haven't been creating an environment of faith at home, but I want to. I haven't been living out my faith at work, but I want to. God, I want mothers to come to you and say, oh God, I'm so scared of these kids growing up, or they've already grown up and they're not walking with you. I want to give up, but I can't give up. I've got to believe that you can bring them back. God, I pray for the young people in this church. Oh, God, we know what they're hearing. God, we thank you for their boldness, that they would be able to go to school in the city. We know what they're hearing, what they're being influenced by. But, God, we want to pray that you would keep your hand on our teenagers and our children and our college students. We know what they're going to hear, but, God, would you remind them that you are truer. You've not sold them a bill of goods. You've not lied to them. You have told them that you've got them and you will be with them when everyone else walks away. So come, Holy Spirit, build our faith. In Jesus' name.